And welcome to the Financial and Administrative Services Committee meeting. On this committee is myself as chair, Councillor Bressie, Councillor Palat, and Mayor Clayton. We will start with a service area update from Chief Whiteway.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. So just a few little updates from the service area. Assessment and taxation. Tax time's moving along smoothly, so reminder to all residents that taxes are due June 30th. Anyone who has not received their tax notice by now, please contact our tax department. We also have summer students and assessors out into neighborhoods doing re-inspections of residential properties. Owners would have been sent information in advance in the mail, allowing them to provide responses electronically. And if we've not received anything electronically, assessors will be visiting those properties. Within our financial management team, we're working towards budget. So we work with departments to prepare operating, staffing, and capital requests. Budget deliberations are in November, but it does take quite a few months of work to get that compiled. In addition, we are working on streamlining some of our month-end processes and sustainability and efficiencies within our new ERP system. Our procurement team is focusing on the setup of a supplier performance evaluation program and plan to implement by the end of June. They've also been supporting the budget development by obtaining quotes from many departments as we prepare for deliberations. And that does conclude my update for today. Thank you.
And is there any questions of Ms. Whiteway? Seeing none, we'll move on to 3.2, Social Procurement, and we'll give Lori a few minutes to, as you're not carrying any technology, you probably don't need a few minutes. You can probably just leap right into it. So Chief Whiteway, would you introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. So today we have our Director of Supply Chain, Lori Gaudet. She's going to go over social procurement. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore, and good morning, everyone. I'm excited to share a unique initiative that is detailed in the report before you today. Social procurement is growing rapidly throughout Canada and within the province of Alberta. We, as a public agency, have an opportunity to explore how community benefits might work and will work for Grande Prairie. Preliminary internal discussions have generated a warm and welcoming response to the focus areas identified within the report. I trust the level of detail within this report is sufficient to enable the recommendation that administration bring forward the 2024 implementation of social procurement for approval at the fall budget deliberations. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have today.
And I'll look to the committee first for questions. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Chair Blackmore. Excited for this report. It seems like a long 5 years since we first started talking about this, and glad to use a really great resource that we've got for this. So excited for this. I'm curious, as we get into implementing this, is there going to be an opportunity for council to set kind of what are our priorities and our hopes for this in terms of, are we really excited about advancing local economy? Are we really excited about people with barriers to employment? Just how's that conversation going to progress?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. To Councillor Bressie, absolutely. We have, through the internal discussions with the departments that we've met with, have generated what we feel will work within the community based on the resources that we have to work with for intermediaries and such, but definitely welcome Council's input on that.
Great, thank you.
So just to clarify, Ms. Gaudet, do we have stakeholder engagement sessions scheduled, or is there a session scheduled with council that would address Councillor Bressie's concerns, or does that still need to take place?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. Firstly, we need support to go forward to the budget deliberations in the fall, as there is a financial implication here. With that support, then definitely we do have preliminary schedules set as to what engagement sessions would look like with external and internal stakeholders. And if at that time council wishes to have a stakeholder meeting, we can definitely arrange that too.
Great, thank you. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Chair Blackmore. I have a couple questions here. So I'm just curious if this were to move forward, what percentage do we see this being in the overall scoring? The overall mechanism of how we would award an RFP?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. To Councillor Palat. Within the evaluation criteria, the standard throughout the UK and Europe, who have declared this as being law within public contracts, is estimated right now between 25 and 35%. I would see that probably being lower within the province of Alberta at this time. In Ontario, for example, 15 to 20% seems to be the relative target. I would suggest that 15% would probably be a good place to start.
And if I can, I have a bunch on this, so I'll just do a couple and I can hop out. But I'm curious, when I read through it, what I didn't see, and I guess my head with social procurement's maybe not where the world's at, but I was just really surprised that there's no metrics in there for whether an organization's doing local donations, whether an organization's actually got members of their organizations that are donating their time for charities and not-for-profits working on boards. And so can you explain to me why maybe that isn't part of our criteria? It seems to be more specific around who people are hiring, not what their business practices are moving out of that.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. That's an interesting point. It's very difficult to measure the amount of donations that an organization brings to its community. How would we weight someone who donates an annual amount of $5,000, say, to someone who donates $500,000? It would be difficult to put a weighting towards that. It could be an inclusion within some of the other practices that we have identified within the social value questionnaire. These are just samples and examples. These can be expanded and decreased or adjusted as needed. But typically, I have not seen that happen yet.
Okay.
In my experience.
I have a bunch more, Councillor or Chair Blackmore, so I can hop out in case others I can hop in later on.
Yeah, we'll go to Councillor Bressie next, as he is on the committee, and then I have Mike in the queue, and I think Chris.
Great, thank you. I really like the steps that are here when it comes to bidders, but I'm curious if there's been any conversation about P cards and those smaller purchases, just for a micro business or a social enterprise, that $1,000 employee gifts for an entire department can make a big difference. Or the smaller purchases wouldn't be bids, but are still purchased made in our community could be huge. So is there any conversation yet about how to create a culture or incentivize P card use having social benefit?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. To Councillor Bressie. It's definitely in discussion, and it is happening in the background now through our pilot project, where we are focusing on our community providers, or we call it our regionals, as it spans 100 kilometers radius from here, from City Hall. There is definitely an opportunity to explore that, especially with discretionary type purchases such as catering and those types of things, how to spread that around more within the community rather than relying on one or two service providers. So it's definitely something in the works.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. My question is just on clarification, and in the questionnaire, it says Section 1, 1.1a, are you a small or medium business? It's asking the question yes or no. And that, to me, that's not a yes or no question. It should be, yes, I'm a small business, and here's how many employees. Am I reading this wrong? I just found that confusing.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. To Councillor Connor. There is a legend within the document as well that determines the definition of small, medium, and large. And it details how many employees, up to so many employees for each individual category.
However, I read the definition, but it, in that question itself, doesn't break it out. I think it's confusing.
We can definitely look at editing that and making it more clear.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Blackmore. Thanks, Lori, for being here today, Ms. Scudette. I have a couple questions, and they are involving the definitions that are presented prior to our questionnaire. So under underrepresented groups, it states without limitation the following members: Indigenous community, members of visible minority group, immigrants and refugees, people with recognized disabilities, racialized communities, youth, women, members of the LGBTQS2S community, low-income residents, people with mental or physical health barriers, people facing employment barriers, unemployment or underemployment, and others experiencing barriers to economic opportunity and participation. So my question is, of these underrepresented groups, who did we leave out?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. To Councillor Thiessen, I'm not sure who we've left out. This is an example that has been created from the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, where I was present for the implementation of social procurement there, and with the City of Calgary's benefit-driven procurement. This is a bit of a blend of both. I don't believe we've left anybody out, but we shall see.
Okay, awesome. And the only reason why I asked that question is because it didn't appear that we left anybody out here anyway. So it seems like everybody qualifies under this definition for social procurement. My other question was underneath some of the definitions, there's in brackets self-identified. So under Indigenous or disabled or women, it says self-identified. Is that to mean that if I identify as a First Nations person, then there's no questions asked, I am a First Nations person? Or if I identify as having a disability because my hair gets tangled every day in mats, would that qualify me also as a person with a disability?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. I would believe that would probably require a little bit more explanation on that one.
Okay. And now my final question to that is are we allowed to ask? Like when it comes to somebody says I'm a First Nations business, or I'm a trans person and this is my business, is it our role societally and acceptably to ask what their gender orientation is, what their Indigenous background is, what their cultural background is, and or what their disability background is?
That's a very good question. It is practice within Alberta to use that type of language within social value questionnaires when applying that to diversity in business and suppliers, etc. So I would answer yes on that.
So perfectly acceptable?
It appears to be.
Okay, thank you.
I think that I'll respond a little bit to Councillor Thiessen's question, because I think that we're not asking them, are you Indigenous? We're asking them, do you identify in any of these categories? So it's a very broad question. Yeah. You're not asking anything specific about sexual orientation or ethnic background. And it's up to the applicant to say yes, no, and identify. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Chair Black. Just on the same vein, I guess I'm trying to think of a new company that's saying, okay, currently we don't have this policy in place and maybe we don't have the right people staffed. How do they apply somebody and say, hey, we want to move towards this? Is an employer legally allowed to ask your sexual orientation or some of the disabilities, some of the things that we're going to award them points are they legally even allowed to ask that when they're interviewing? And I'm asking that is if you're losing contracts and we're trying to go to a social procurement, and now I need to have certain types of employees on my payroll to apply, how do they do that? I'm trying to walk my head around how an employer actually does this.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. This is more about qualifying for social value and identifying businesses that are participating in these types of things that we've identified in the questionnaire. It's not going to apply to every single contract that we put on the market. It will be very specific as to the ones that do. And it'll probably be for the lower dollar valued contracts to try and reward the vendors that we deal with that already do really good things in the background that we don't identify and we aren't rewarding them for. So it's about taking away from the low bid culture and trying to enhance best value culture by rewarding them for what they're doing really well.
So just when I'd asked earlier about how we'd measure if a company was using donations or not. So we award a tender January 15th to a company because they've met all our inclusivities. How do we actually make sure they're actually doing that internally? Like, we're awarding a contract based on that. We're giving potentially an unfair advantage to one business over another one. How do we actually ensure that that business is actually doing everything that they say they're doing, other than just checking a bunch of boxes and sending it into the city? It's a huge concern for me, because I don't think the $92,000 covers that. I don't think, if we're going to be honest about going in and actually auditing businesses. So I'm just really concerned, and I guess I'm hoping you can help my mind with, how do we make sure that we're just not making companies that check boxes that say they're doing all these great things, that they're actually doing them?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Blackmore. The whole idea of social procurement, when it was first brought out in the UK and in Canada, was the first question that came about. How are you going to ensure that the outputs are measured properly and they're attained? And that's why you put a contract specialist in charge of those contracts to make sure that the deliverables that are outlined within those contracts actually come to fruition. So it is about someone auditing, periodic checks, meetings with the vendors. It is more of an on-hands, contract administration type portion of that role to ensure that it happens. That was the first thing that was identified in Fort McMurray when we did this in RMWB. And we made sure that we had that person in place and that they were fully trained and knew how to do what they were supposed to do. To do that, we also ensure that we also have a belief that we trust the submissions that are coming from the suppliers and the bidders, that they are going to give us the truth and they aren't just checking boxes to win a contract, because this is about social value. It's not about monetary value.
No, and I can appreciate that, but when it comes to a business owner trying to get a contract to provide livelihood for their employees, it can get gray sometimes, and it's a huge concern for me that I really worry that we're entering into an area that we actually don't know if we're actually getting the goals achieved that we want to achieve, and the level of auditing we'd actually have to do to go back and ensure that those organizations are doing that. So again, I have more questions. I'll hop out for now, though.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. I guess I'm similar to Councillor Thiessen and Councillor Plot in regards to one, the demographics in which we live. Are you going to have the same points as you would give, a community in the UK, right? Their demographics are very different to us. And my concern is in regards to the issues that we have with labor right now, both skilled and unskilled, because one company may have the ability to do the job, but they don't have the underrepresented groups or the veterans within their company. Are they in fact penalized versus another company, right? So I think our demographics have something to do with it. I worry about people being left out based that they don't have something that is, underrepresented in their staffing. And to Councillor Thiessen's point, if someone says that they have an issue, developmental or special needs or whatever, but have no way of proving it, it's just words, in my opinion. I guess.
Councillor Bosch, do you have a question?
My comment is with the community involvement piece. Yeah, I'm listening to them. The community involvement piece, I think there should be some value in not necessarily monetary, but in maybe hours of volunteering, maybe. And so that isn't dependent on, how many staff you have or how much money you have. It is per person. What is your hours of volunteering in our community or giving back to our community? I think that has a higher value because that takes in light of all people in our community.
Councillor Bosch, I'm going to interrupt you because I don't see a question there. And I would remind the committee that we're not debating the ins and outs of this today. We're simply making a motion to move it on to budget. And there will be a lot of time between now and then to work out the nitty-gritty details. Although I caution you, our job is not to play in the operational field of the world. Our job is to provide governance. And I think the level of discussion we're entering in today is getting too far down into the weeds. So I would ask, because we're running way behind time today as well, that we have a motion to move this forward to budget to either approve or defeat at this time. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Chair Blackmore. I can't make that motion, but I would make a motion that we receive further information about what an engagement process will look like with our vendors. I have a really hard time approving this and not even knowing the vendors have been talked to about it. I'm really struggling with this one, to be honest, and so I can't approve it in principle today, but I'd like to see us get more information to start working towards that decision. I think it's a lot today to make a decision to go to budget and add this in there. So my motion would...
But this is to move it to budget discussion, not to actually provide a budget for it.
So if it's on that context, I can't make a motion on that, and I wouldn't support that because I don't think we have enough information to be having a lengthy... Budget's already a long process, and we're going to add something like this at budget without a bunch of information. And I still feel very lacking on information of what this is going to achieve in our community. I think it's very utopian in thinking. So I can't support it, and I wouldn't be able to make a motion, sorry.
But you just did make a motion.
I made a motion to get further information about it, but not to anything to do with it going to budget.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Blackmore. I had a question for administration, or possibly, okay, perfect, Chief Whiteway. I share some of Councillor Plot's concerns, not with the overall theme here, with the work that's been done. I do share concerns that budget is an interesting time to debate this for all of council. It's basically committee putting this to budget as opposed to going to council to put it to budget. So I'm just wondering the thoughts behind that.
Absolutely, thank you. Through Chair Blackmore. So our intention today was because this is a council priority to go down this path. So it is a very new concept. And so we had wanted to bring forward the work done to date, knowing that exactly that is budget deliberations the best place to first introduce something like this and the work that Lori and her team have been doing. So the intention was to bring it forward today for an introduction. You'll have this information. We have committed at a previous council meeting that these items introduced at reports during the year will be recirculated prior to budget so that there can be more conversation. So what Ms. Gaudet has gone through today, and I'll address specifically in terms of like engagement and discussing with some other stakeholders, that is part of the future plan. We do require FTE to support this initiative going forward. This is some background to help with the decision to keep going with it for future years. The exact checklists, this example that has been provided today, certainly is a work in progress, and it will be adjusted according to any sort of engagement that is done throughout 2024 to start implementing this. So the intention was not to say, here, this is what it looks like, we're looking for approval, this is our introduction, we'd like to discuss more, and this is an introduction of why we would require some budget conversation in November.
So, Ms. Whiteway, just to clarify, we're not making a motion today to implement social procurement. We're making a motion today to move forward with the investigation of social procurement.
And so if I may, Madam Chair, I think that if in principle this committee approves the implementation of a social procurement policy and therefore wants to see it as a an expense item in the fall budget deliberation, then then committee should approve that. The secondary motion that Councillor Plott has in there, I think, is valuable as well. And regarding bringing back additional information following the stakeholder engagement, that information will then help all of council make the decision when it comes to fall. So,
Councillor Bressy.
I'm just curious. I know that this appears in our strategic plan, but it's about 3 words in our strategic plan. Do we have any council-approved policy or any council-approved fleshing out of what we're actually hoping to achieve here and what it would look like? Because I think there might be a disconnect there.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. I don't believe there is, Councillor Bressy. I think that is something that we were working towards over the years, but didn't actually come to fruition. So I think that's why we're here today.
Yeah, and I think for me, where I'm struggling with this is I think some of my colleagues have a different understanding of what this looks like than I look like and how wholesome it is and how it is. And we've got a different understanding, I think, today of what's being proposed. And also, we've definitely got a different understanding of what we want to accomplish through this. And I'm really struggling with the idea of we're going to, frankly, as a guy that really wants to see social procurement move forward, but I think in a different way than some councils are picturing how this is moving forward right now. I'm worried if we just send this to budget, it gets defeated because we don't really know what we're talking about because council hasn't done the work of what we're figuring out. So for me, I can't support sending it to budget before we've done more work. I'm just a little bit confused. Do we have a motion on the table right now?
Yes, we do.
Sorry, can I speak to my motion a little bit?
I think you can.
Okay. So it says committee director report bringing back further information regarding social procurement after stakeholder engagement. And I guess for me, and maybe Councillor Bressy's right, is I need to know how this is going to be monitored. I want to make sure that it's going to be, the engagement piece has been done, how it's going to be monitored, and what percentage of this is actually going to be part of the tender. That actually concerns me a lot. If this is going to be a high amount of the tender, it goes to just this one component, I don't know how I'll ever be able to support that, to be honest, because I don't think it's in our best interest. We live in a very unique world, and look at across our labor market right now. Its administration wants to deal with that part of it because I think there's a lot of nuances in this, to me, that I would need to have a lot more comfortability with, and I think we have to have good conversations about before we even think about talking about budget. That's where, I guess, for me, I'm at, but I'm just wondering what administration thinks next steps are. I have a motion there, but there's a lot of things I would need to see for information before I feel very comfortable with it. And I don't think I'm the only one sitting around the table that feels that way, so I'm just curious what administration's thoughts are.
Chief Whiteway.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. I certainly can. I think that it should be added to the outstanding items list that we could bring back some more information prior to deliberations, and we could have that addressed likely within the next few months and be able to gather some more information and share some of those pieces that have been discussed today.
That'd be great. Really appreciate it.
Councillor Bressy and then Mayor Clayton.
Yeah, I guess a question I've got for administration in terms of workload and time to get, for me, I don't know if I necessarily need more information. I need council to set a direction on what council wants us to look like if we move forward with this. And I'm inclined to make a motion asking administration to come forward with a proposed policy for this so that council can say, hey, here are the outcomes that administration sees, and we like this outcome, we like that outcome, we don't like this one. But I'm wondering what it looks like if council wants to say, hey, we actually want to start, not just get more information about what you're thinking, but start setting what we're thinking for this so that we can drive towards where council wants to go.
Well, we already have one motion on the floor, so if you want to make that motion, I'm sure you will be patient and wait. Mayor Clayton.
Well, and sorry, Councillor Blackmore, I guess for me, I'm trying to figure out how long policy development might take and what that might look like. It's relevant to this motion. If I'm going to make, if I want us to get a policy made before budget comes, if I'm waiting 2 to 3 months for information to come before I make a motion for policy to come.
No, I mean today.
Okay.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks. If Councillor Plott were to withdraw his motion, I'd be prepared to make a motion to direct administration to arrange a council workshop in regards to social procurement. Through that, we can discuss and achieve agreed upon outcomes that we're looking for, and that may help administration as we lead into the next preferred or recommended rather motion of bringing it to budget. So if Councillor Plot was interested in withdrawing, I'd be happy to make that motion.
Councillor Plot.
I'd be fine with withdrawing. I'm just curious though, as when it does come back, is this an in-camera conversation? Is this really is land legal labor? Like we're talking about a very legal thing that we're going to switch our city and how we consider it switch our direction of procurement. It feels fairly legal to me.
Yeah, my expectation that the council workshop would be in camera.
Okay, thank you. Be happy to withdraw my motion and hope this one passes.
Okay.
I move that committee direct administration to arrange a council workshop for the discussion of social procurement and that workshop be in camera. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion of the new motion? Seeing none, I will call the question.
Yep.
And that carries. It seems to me that the option to start that sentence over again, it seems to me that there is a lack of resources that council's putting towards this, in that if it doesn't go to budget, there's not enough resources in procurement to handle this. So I'm going to ask Chief Whiteway, with the motion that's on the table right now, are we okay without a motion to go to budget?
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. Yes, with this motion, we'll still be able to proceed with the workshop and those sorts of things and do more work, and that'll provide us with the clarity for moving forward. And we can certainly still at that point bring something in budget, regardless, to move it forward.
Okay. Then I think we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Godot, for coming today. So 3.3 RCMP retroactive pay. Chief Whiteway, would you introduce that for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Blackmore. So the Financial and Administrative Services Committee recommends Council approve the deferral of payment for the RCMP retroactive salary obligation until March of 2025. So the Government of Canada signed the first collective agreement regarding the Royal Canadian Mounted Police regular members and reservists with the National Police Federation on August 6, 2021. This agreement resulted in a retroactive salary cost increase for the period of January 1st, 2017 through till March 31st, 2022. On March 30th of this year, the city did receive an invoice for our share of the retroactive costs. This totaled just over $3.9 million. We were given the option to defer payment of the retroactive pay until no later than March 31st, 2025. So we have been in contact with the Management Committee Secretariat to confirm that extending repayment to March 31st, 2025 will not result in any interest or any other charges incurred on the retroactive invoice. We currently have $4.3 million earmarked for this specific expenditure. By deferring the full amount of the invoice, the city will benefit financially, as the funds would earn investment income at a rate of approximately 2% over the remaining months of the deferral period. Thank you.
Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. One question I have is there about a $400,000 difference between what we've got earmarked and what's actually needed? Are we going to free up that $400,000 immediately for other uses?
Chief Whiteway.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. Not right at the moment. We do expect another invoice to come for the commissioned officers. So our preliminary estimates had put that at a couple $100,000. So we'd like to hold that 400 till we get that invoice and know the actual amount.
Okay, go ahead.
And are we doing work to make sure that we only get billed for the city proportion of those commission officers we used, that we're not getting billed for the time they spent in county operations?
Chief Whiteway.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. When we receive the invoice, we will be responsibly reviewing it.
Great. Happy to make the motion if nobody's else is in the queue.
Yep, go ahead. No one else is raising your hand.
Sure. I move that the Financial Administrative Services Committee recommends Council approve the deferral of payment for the RCMP retroactive salary obligation until March 2025.
That motion is in order, so I will call a question. The computer's thinking.
Bressie in favor.
And that carries unanimously. The next item on our agenda, 3.4, is a first quarter 2023 financial report. And I'll ask Chief Whiteway to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. Presented to you today is the financial statements and supporting information for the period ending March 31st, 2023. I won't go through the report in great detail. I'll respectfully assume you've all reviewed, but the detailed financial statements and information are in the Appendix 1 to the report. It does walk through the various unaudited financial statements for the city at the end of the first quarter. And I'll just summarize the overall findings and conclusion at the end of Q1 for the city. We are anticipating a slight shortfall of $605,000 by year end. This does equate to approximately a 0.31% variance from the total city operating budget. Management will continue to explore alternatives to reduce this current expected shortfall and mitigate any and implement any mitigating strategies. We maintain a net financial asset position and accumulated surplus, indicating that there are sufficient resources to support all future services. We are well within our provincially prescribed debt and debt servicing limits as required by the Municipal Government Act, and have maintained sufficient reserves to support fiscal prudency. Thank you.
Are there any questions, Councillor Palat?
No, I'm fine with everything, and I just wanted to make made a comment to admin, but I'm not in the report as far as councillors. Councillor O'Toole or Connor apparently does double duty, so just to make an amendment that I'm not sure which O'Toole or O'Connor line item I am, but just if they could highlight that for maybe next meeting, that I could be part of council, that'd be great.
You've been meaning to mention that you've been really slacking off.
Yeah. Well, it shows up in the report, I guess. So yeah.
Just to address, thank you, Mr. Blackmore. We will correct the column headers prior to publishing on the city's website. So these are every quarterly financial report is available for anybody to see at any time on the city's website. So we'll ensure it's corrected before it gets posted.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. If there's no other comments or questions, I would ask for a motion. Go ahead, Councillor Palat.
There is no further business. Okay. So I'd make a motion that committee recommend council receive the unaudited financial statements and supporting information for the period ending March 31st, 2023 for information.
And that motion is in order. I see no hands shooting up, so I will call the question. And that carries unanimously. So moving ahead in the agenda, I will go back to Chief Whiteway to review the outstanding items list.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore. So the RCMP retroactive pay will go forward to council on Monday. So that one will be completed. Borrowing capacity, we are expected to be bringing that to next committee. So that's on track for Q2. We would like to move the fees and charges policy review ahead to Q3, just to be able to do an appropriate jurisdictional scan and finish gathering the information required there. And finally, we'd like to move the ERP update up to Q4. Reason being is that within Q4 will be our 1 year mark, and feeling that 1 year is a more appropriate analysis period for this report. Thank you.
Thank you. And look for a motion. Councillor Bressie.
Happy to move that we receive as amended.
And I'll call a question.
Mayor Clayton in favor.
And that carries. With that, we'll adjourn the Financial Administrative Services Standing Committee meeting and probably want to start the next meeting relatively soon. Thanks.
As soon as I get the nod from the